Rachel Edidin.
And I'm Miles Stokes.
And we're the co-hosts of Rachel and Miles Explain the X-Men, a weekly podcast where we walk listeners through the ins, outs, and retcons of our favorite superhero soap opera.
We're also the co-hosts, right here, of Rachel and Miles Review the X-Men, where we talk about all the X-Men books that come out each week.
Now, this week, as it happens, we have a whopping, I think, record 6 X books, including Axis, which is a crossover. On the upside, sort of upside, most of them aren't really that notable, so hopefully we'll be able to blaze through pretty fast. What have we got up first?
First up, we have Amazing X-Men number 12, which is by the whopping team, writing-wise, of Craig Kyle and Chris Yost, and the pencilers Carlo Barberi and Iban Cobello.
That is a lot of creative team.
It is. I like to think that there's like a red team, blue team, and they're actually competing with each other in like chicken races and stuff.
It's an X book, though, so wouldn't it be blue team, gold team?
Good point. Blue team, gold team. So anyway, this is the final chapter of the storyline that's been going on for a while now, World War Wendigo, which I really love that as a title. And it's very much of a tone, I think, with the previous chapters, which is to say it's very much a colorful, bright, action-y, quippy, comic booky story, which almost feels like a Saturday morning cartoon if Saturday morning cartoons were drenched in blood.
You know, I think you liked this one a lot more than I did. I found it pretty lackluster compared to the rest of the series. I feel like the characters are out of character. The fact that it is as far removed from continuity as it is, so we have, Wolverine as a character while we're reading about his death in other books, is a little obnoxious. And yeah, this one just felt scattered and rushed to me.
I mean, I guess that's fair. I certainly wouldn't call it essential. In a way, it's a fluffy book, but that's not always a bad thing, in my opinion. If you just want to see some, like, sort of superhero action that's sort of its own thing and is not really going to necessarily leave a mark on continuity or on your view of the entire cosmos, it's a good book. If not, if you're looking for just the core story, definitely skippable.
I want good fluff, though. This is like the Nerd's Rope of comic books. Next up, we have Axis number 3, and as you may recall, I was surprised to discover that I actually enjoyed the first 2 issues of this. Not so much the third. It has gone from slightly contrived but fun big superhero brawl to really contrived superhero argument, and that's not nearly as entertaining.
Yeah, we've talked about summer crossovers, well, fall crossovers in this case before, as kind of like action movies, and I would say if number 1 and 2 were maybe Michael Bay's The Rock, this is Michael Bay's Transformers.
Ooh, wow, that bad? I don't know if it's quite that. Like, I don't actively regret having read it, I just kind of regret having paid for it.
Well, that's fair. Next up, we have Cyclops number 6 by John Layman with art by Javier Garron, and, oh boy. Okay, so the previous one was done by Greg Rucka with a couple of different artists, and it was stellar. Some of the best comics I've read in ages.
Yeah, it was phenomenal. It was everything we wanted out of a Cyclops solo book. This is not.
I mean, okay, so it's not so much that it's a bad comic. I wouldn't call it a bad comic, but following the previous run, where just the characters were spot on voice-wise, and there was all this thematic depth and emotional nuance and believability in addition to this really over-the-top perfect action, it's rough. How can you follow that?
It's not a bad comic, but it is a bad Cyclops comic. It's generic. You could drop any couple characters in for the protagonists, I think, leave the story pretty much untouched, and still have it work. And that, for me, is a hallmark of a bad solo book.
Right. I mean, it's not so much Cyclops, Corsair, and Hepzibah, say, as teenaged character, his dad who's kind of a jerk sometimes, and sexy lady. And this could just be an issue of the creative team not having a handle on the voices yet. We certainly saw that at the beginning of Bendis's run on X-Men, but I don't know, man. I don't know. I'll give it a chance. I give everything a chance. So far, though, this was a disappointing issue.
Now, I mentioned earlier that this has been a generally pretty lackluster week for X-books. There's one notable exception, and that is X-Force number 11, written by Simon Spurrier, drawn by Rock Hae Kim. We've been talking about this series and how good it is for a while now. You should be reading this if you want an X-book that's smart, that's interesting, that's detached enough from the big crossover and general Marvel continuity that you can follow it without reading a bunch of series. And also just if you want superlative comics. This issue brings a lot of ongoing story that Spurrier's been building up for a while to a head. And man, it is a hell of a climax.
That said, in a way, it's also the beginning of a new arc, as some crazy things happen. one of the things I'm really enjoying about X-Force is just how much as I never thought they would, these versions of the characters, Cy Spurrier's versions, they're really becoming my definitive versions. Like, this is the most interesting I've ever seen most of these characters. Phantom X and Marrow, yeah, they're written very differently, but they're fascinating in this book, and that really is the entire book right there.
And something that's become increasingly clear is that the characters who are off-model for story reasons,
right.
Not just because it's a writer going in and overwriting their previous voices. And again, that's been a sort of a slow burn. God, we've talked about Claremont's slow burn storytelling on the podcast a lot. I think Spurrier's going to have to get his name added to that list because, man, this is the climax of 11 issues worth of build-up and launching into even more.
Next up, we have all new X Factor number 15 by Peter David and Carmine de Giandomenico. So this book, I don't know what it is. Sometimes it's incredibly good, sometimes it's incredibly lackluster.
Yeah, it is. Its most notable factor for me right now is how uneven it is.
Right. This week, unfortunately, is one of the lackluster issues. It's technically an Axis tie-in. Everybody's being mean to each other all across the world because Red Skull's a big jerk.
You can't see me rolling my eyes because I'm wearing sunglasses, but I'm definitely rolling my eyes.
I don't even know if she has eyes. Anyway, and so the team is protecting Washington, D.C. from the crazy people. This is a very action-heavy issue, so if the new X-Force this week is an example of how to do action right while getting a lot of character stuff across, this may be an example of how to do action in a way that mainly just fills pages. Like, I feel like even though a lot happens in this book, action fighty-wise, there's really not a lot of development, and that's unfortunate. Especially when you have such a strong cast of interesting characters.
Yeah, X Factor is at its best, and Peter David is at his best as a writer when he can function sort of outside of or diagonal to continuity and big events. This is why. This is X Factor trying to do a big event and tie in and just falling super flat.
That said, I think the book gains at least one letter grade for a Barack Obama Conan comic book gag that had me literally laughing out loud. So there's that at least. The book is scheduled to be ending relatively soon. I really hope it picks up the quality and just picks up the sort of engagement factor before it does, because I know it can do that.
Finally, we have this week's Mercifully Soul tie-in to The Death of Wolverine. This is the Logan Legacy number 2, written by Tim Seeley, drawn by Ariella Cristantina, and colored by Sonia Obak. And it's a good story. This is you'll recall, a bunch of different Wolverine-connected characters sitting around telling each other stories. This is X-23's story, and as an X-23 standalone, it's great.
But see, the weird thing is, it really feels like a standalone. The first issue had all these characters talking and referring to things that had already happened, which are going to be the rest of the series until the last issue. And this could have been a standalone in any kind of context like that. There's very little connecting it to the whole Death of Wolverine thing, except that X-23 found out that Wolverine died and she's sad.
Yeah, the connection is contrived. That said, if you were an X-23 fan, and specifically if you miss Marjorie Liu's terrific run on the book, I would pick this up really independent of the rest of the series. It's a great X-23 standalone story. Its connection to the Logan Legacy is shaky at best, but it's a solid issue in its own right.
It also has the advantage of being much weirder than I thought it would. Like, it starts out, it's all moody, and it's all about Laura's emotions, and then a bunch of villains called the Happy Clams show up, and a C-list Canadian superhero called the Chinook does, and that actually ends up being thematically significant, which, what? It's great.
X-23 makes a really good straight man, and often is at her best when she's being played that way. Again, solid character issue, tied to the Death of Wolverine, meh.
So Rachel, what's our pick of the week?
There is, in my mind at least, absolutely no question that it's X-Force number 11. I mean, this is a standout issue of a standout run. Cy Spurrier and Rockhay Kim at their best individually and as a creative team. And yeah, it's a great crystallization of why we've been loving this book and why it's one of the best X series currently on the stands.
Yeah, if you're just going to pick one X book to read this week, let that be it.
X-Force number 11. So that's our issue of the week. What would you say is our panel of the week?
I would say it's actually, as much as I was not a huge fan of this week's X Factor, all new X Factor, there's a great panel of Quicksilver doing a sort of heisty thing after we, the readers, see the results of it, stealing the nuclear football from a Secret Service-y president type dude.
Yeah, it's a leverage briefcase switch with none of the artistry.
Yeah, and what I really like about this one right here is the facial expressions are what really sell it. So the 2.5 times we see the security guard kind of guy, he's in these sort of like awkward facial expressions, not the kind you would rest in, but just transitional, the ones that look silly if someone photographs you during them. And then we see Quicksilver, his face is totally calm, all business. He knows exactly what's going on, and that's how you show a superpower working. You show just the ways in which your life is going to be different. The way you would interact with the world is going to be different if you were using that power. It's brilliant visual storytelling.
Yeah, there are two ways to do super speed in a comic. One of them is really gracefully, almost invisibly. The other one is incredibly awkwardly and emphasizing, again, the awkward moments. That's something, actually, that X-Men Days of Future Past, the movie, did really beautifully as well. And this reminds me of that in terms of the grace versus awkwardness.
Absolutely. Quicksilver on both counts, too. Good old Pietro.
So that is it for this week. All whopping 6 X books, I guess including Axis, which isn't technically one. If you've been enjoying these video reviews, they are made possible by the generous support of our Patreon subscribers. You can become one of those by clicking at the link below. We have cool swag and prizes, including access to a backstage blog with episode outlines and outtakes from these videos, among other things. We assure you they're delightful. Maybe, we think.
Oh, yeah.
We swear a lot in them.
They're nothing but non-stop profanity.
Yeah, if you listen to the podcast, you know that this is like the very sanitized Rachel and Miles, so you get the real versions on that.
Speaking of the podcast, please check out our podcast, which is Rachel and Miles Explain the X-Men. You can find that at rachelandmiles.com, where we have visual companion posts for every episode, editorials, fan art, all sorts of cool content. Also on iTunes and Stitcher, new episodes go up every Sunday.
And this Sunday in particular, we are super pleased to welcome back our favorite guest ever. That is writer Greg Rucka, who is going to be joining us to talk about Kitty Pryde, specifically the old Kitty Pryde and Wolverine miniseries, where she gets her brand new and best-known codename, Shadowcat.
Phase you later.
I can't believe you said phase you later.